Hi besties, welcome back or welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna be tier ranking all of my books from the past 3 years. I just love watching people rank and review their books. So I was like, why not do a tier ranking of all of my books? So a little history of my reading journey. I used to read a lot as a kid, and in high school, I was obsessed with anything YA. I was obsessed with any dystopian series, some fantasy. We're talking Divergent, Hunger Games, Mortal Instruments series, and that like type of genre. And then in college, I kind of fell off with reading, but then I fell back in love with reading in 2021 during like that COVID area. We were trying to figure out what to do, where book talk kind of just like ran the world for a second. And so since then I've filled my bookshelf with YA, romance, and fantasy. And so I thought we could tier rank all of my books from the past 3 years. So we're gonna go through my categories really quick. We have my Roman Empire. These are the books that I just simply cannot shut up about. These books just live in my head rent free. Then we have top reads, anywhere from like 4 to 5 stars that I would recommend to anybody. We have my comfort books. These are just feel good books to revisit whenever I just want like a little comforting read. Then we have mid, self-explanatory. This was a different version of me. I made this category because there are some books in my collection that were from like 2021 me, and 2021 me and 2024 me are very different in what I like to read, so we'll get into it. And then last category is noir. Like, absolutely not, would not recommend, and I just like simply did not enjoy the books. So I've added all the books here that I have read since 2021. I know it's not an extensive list compared to like a bunch of like booktubers, etc. But anyways, this is my little collection and let's just get into it. And so I'm gonna rank these books by order of when I read them. And I've kept track of all the books that I've read in my Goodreads by date. So we're gonna go through 2021 me through now. Okay, first book is It Ends With Us. This book blew up on TikTok. This book alone honestly got me back into reading. So it's like, I owe it a lot. It just like resurrected me. Then I did a reread like a year ago and I absolutely did not love it. So it's just crazy like seeing the different versions of yourself, like liking something, and then a different year you're just like not into it. So November 13th, 2021, I gave It Ends With Us a 5-star rating, which is crazy. But current me, I'm gonna put it on This Was a Different Version of Me. I feel like that's like the best category to put it because I'm not gonna dog on this book just because again, it got me back into reading. When I did my reread, I would like read things and I'd be like cringing, like actually cringing. But what I do like about the book is I feel like it showed the realness of like the struggles in a relationship and how like, you know, when you just love someone, it kind of just blinds you from all these like different red flags. I feel like the writing wasn't terrible, so we're just gonna put it in This Is a Different Version of Me. All right, next we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. So for a minute, these are all gonna be like Colleen Hoover books. I'm not gonna lie, I still think this book is really good. I don't think it's like 5-star status. I did give it a 5-star on Goodreads, but this book had me in a chokehold the entire time. I remember reading this for the first time and I genuinely could not put the book down. I finished it in a day and a half. It's a great mix of like thriller, romantic, and creepy. It's really good. I low-key been wanting to reread it just because it's like a good standalone book and it'll be like a good like palette cleanser from the fantasy that I'm in right now. But I think Verity is probably my favorite Colleen Hoover book. Out of my whole book collection now, I don't think it's gonna be considered top rate or Roman Empire, but it's definitely a comfort book that I would definitely revisit. Okay, next we have Ugly Love, clearly in my Colleen Hoover era. At the time I gave it 4 stars, but now that I'm looking back and like some of the things that were said in Ugly Love, I don't think I stick with 4 stars. It was definitely like a steamy and spicy book, but there are parts looking back that I'm like, why did I love this? Like it's a little, I don't know. I think I'm gonna put it at This Was a Different Version of Me. I think that's just fair. I wouldn't not recommend it to somebody, but I also wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I love this book, you need to read it. It was just a different version of me, you know? Still going with Colleen Hoover, we have November 9. At the time I gave it 4 stars. I think now I would give it like a 3.5. It's still a cute book. And I remember in this era, I truly ate it up. It was so good at that time. And I thought this book did a really good job of like flipping back and forth through time. And that seems to be like a theme in Colleen Hoover books, that she flips through different phases of time. But I remember that I absolutely loved Ben, which is the male MC in this book. And there was like an unexpected plot twist that I couldn't put this down. I wouldn't consider it a comfort book. Would I reread it again? I think I'll have to go with mid. That's where I'll put it. Because it was a different version of me, but I also wouldn't consider it a comfort book, so I'm gonna put it mid. Next book is Confess by Colleen Hoover. I rated it 3 stars. in Goodreads, but honestly, probably like a 2 for me. Obviously, I was in deep with Colleen Hoover books, so I think I was just eating up any type of romance, but now I would definitely put this in NAR. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. Honestly, like, the storyline was okay. I just remember the writing was just not as great as her other books, so I definitely would not recommend it. Next, we have Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. This one I also remember I didn't enjoy as much as her other one, but I did like it better than Confess. So I think I'm gonna put it under This Was a Different Version of Me. That's just a fair, you know, thing. Because I also remember that I really liked the male MC in this because of his like story, and I really liked Samson and Bea's cute like summer fling vibes, so I think that's why I enjoyed it more than Confess. Next, we have Layla by Colleen Hoover. This one is definitely a NAR. I wanted to love this book so bad because I was looking for something similar to Verity by Colleen Hoover. If you read Verity, you know that it's like thrilly, creepy romance, and I heard that Layla was like similar vibes. Not good. There was like some paranormal activity in it, and so it was really hard for me to get into it. It felt like I was just following the plot line of a ghost, and it was just weird. So the characters are Leeds and Layla, and they're in love. There's an unexpected attack that leaves Layla fighting for her life. This attack, Layla recovers like fully physically, but mentally she does not. So in order to kind of like save their relationship and just like make things back to what they were, Leeds takes Layla to the bed and breakfast place that they first met at, and like once they arrive, Layla's behavior like completely turned, and so they kind of like distance themselves. From what I remember, during this time, Leeds connects with this like paranormal presence through his laptop called, her name is Willow, and he like forms a connection with her. I really hope I'm remembering this correctly, but he forms a connection with her and things get like a little weird. It felt like he had to make a decision between Willow and his like physical girl. I don't know. It was really hard for me to like get convinced with the storyline and just like see it through. I remember this just took everything out of me to finish this book, so I just would not recommend it. All right, finally, we are exploring other authors. Okay, next we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I really love Emily Henry's writing. She's popular for a reason. It's like a very feel-good summer book. She just captures like standalone romances so well. At the time, I rated this a 3 out of 5, but honestly, I think I still stick to that. I would say it's a comfort read. I can honestly see myself rereading this book because it's just a feel-good friends to lovers romance, and I could see myself like tanning on the beach and reading this. My favorite trope is enemies to lovers, so it takes a lot for me to like a friends to lovers trope. I remember this one I really enjoyed. So I think I'm gonna put it on comfort books. Not anything life-altering, just a comfort book. Next is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this a 3 out of 5 at the time, and I think I stick with that. So I typically don't care for books with multiple POVs, but I remember this one had me really captivated because I was honestly just intrigued following the stories of all the different band members. I will say I am a Camilla stan to the end of time. Camilla just deserves the world. That's all I'm gonna say. I think I would put Daisy Jones and the Six at like mid. I personally would not read it again, so it's not comfort book tier, but I'd put it as mid. One Day in December by Josie Silver. It's a really cute romance read for the holiday season. I remember when I read this during like the Christmas time, I was just like cozied up next to my fireplace, and I was just genuinely enjoying this book. If you're looking for a seasonal Christmas book, I would highly recommend this one. It's such an easy like feel-good read, and this is definitely gonna be in comfort books. Like I would read this again during the Christmas season. This next one might piss some people off. This is a hot take. This is Normal People by Sally Rooney. My hot take is that this book sucks. I honestly was so bored with this book. I think it's because I had such high expectations for this book because everyone raved about it. Everyone was just gassing it up. I remember getting into about like 50 or so pages, and I was like, is this what you guys hype up so much? I struggled reading it all the way through. The only thing that kept me reading all the way through is because I wanted to watch the show on Hulu. I'm sorry, communication tropes just will not do it for me. They honestly just frustrate me because I'm pretty outspoken with how I feel, like especially like with my partner, just in general to people, that like I just couldn't relate to the communication problems they had. And it's like majority of their problems could have been solved if they just talked it out. I know that's a lot of people's like Roman Empire or whatever, but I just cannot do it with the miscommunication tropes. Like I was just very disappointed. I like the Hulu show way better than the actual book. Sorry, that is my hot take. I'm gonna put Normal People at NAR. Just did not enjoy it, and I just personally would not recommend it. Okay, Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I remember being honestly bored with this book. The storyline was okay, but I just did not love any of the romance parts. And again, with like the miscommunication tropes, there was some miscommunication in this book that I just did not enjoy. Some cringy parts, spicy parts just did not do it for me. So I would have to give this NAR. Okay, next is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is January 19th, 2022. I gave this a 2 out of 5. I vividly remember it being so slow up until the middle of the book. It was really hard for me to keep hanging on. I think it's just personally because I'm not into like the original story of this. I should have done my research before picking up this book, because if I had known that it's the modern adaptation of Homer's The Iliad, I would not have read it. I've just never been into that story in general. I love Greek mythology, and I grew up reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, and I'm here for it. I love it. But for some reason, I just could not get into the specific like war tale. It was just not for me. I just had a really hard time getting through it. I know that a lot of people genuinely love this and like cried about it, but the only good part for me was like the ending. I did like get a little bit sentimental at the end of the story, but I still hold my rating 2 out of 5. So I'm gonna have to put this at NAR. Okay, next, this was strictly a book talk decision, so do not make fun of me. This is Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. The plot was just not good. It was too spicy to the point where the plot was just like non-existent. I absolutely hated this book. Honestly, nothing else to talk about this book. It's just not good. It's a NAR for me. Next is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I gave this a 5-star at the time, and I think I still stick to it. And again, I am a enemies to lovers trope girly, so for me to rank Love and Other Words at 5 stars, this is a friends to lovers trope. Elliot and Macy were best friends like growing up. They went through a bunch of different things in their youth, and like they grew up, etc. I'm not gonna get into the whole storyline, but their love story is so like heartwarming and also just tragic, and you could feel the emotions that these characters were feeling. And honestly, still to this day, one of my favorite standalone romance books. It's just so good, it's so well written. And I really wanna read more books by Christina Lauren. I've heard she has other great books as well. Recommended this book a lot to my friends. So I'm gonna put Love and Other Words at top reads. Next is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. You guys, one thing about me, I'm a Twilight girly. Team Edward for life. And you're telling me I could read a book strictly from Edward's point of view? I'm there. So if you guys haven't heard, this is from the Twilight Saga. It's book number 5. It came out way later than the original like Twilight Saga. And as much as I loved the Twilight Saga as a kid and like reading it from Bella's point of view, it just hits different being from Edward's point of view. Like, this man is absolutely feral for Bella, and we like didn't really see that in the movies. We only saw, you know, Bella's point of view and how she was just absolutely down bad for this vampire, really wanted to turn for him. But having Twilight from Edward's point of view was just everything. This book was so good. It's a very big book, so it took me like 2 months to get through it. I was just eating it up the whole time. I remember highlighting a bunch of parts in this book because it was so good. And again, just seeing it from Edward's point of view, it was just chef's kiss. So I would put Midnight Sun as a top read for sure. Next, we are getting into fantasy. Ugh, I've been dying to do this. We're getting into this personality change from romance to fantasy. This era is like probably my favorite era, and I'm still living in it. So the first book to get me into the fantasy genre is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. You guys have heard me talk about this series in nearly every single vlog. This series alone got me into the fantasy realm, and I'm just obsessed with Sarah J. Maas. I read this in May of 2022, and at the time I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. I recently reread A Court of Thorns and Roses like about 2 months ago, and in my vlogs you guys saw me like tabbing my books because I just wanted to like catch on to Easter eggs a lot earlier in the plot. And today I think I would honestly rate it a 3.5, maybe 4. But I will say the beginning is hard to get into, especially if you are not a fantasy reader like myself at the time. I remember it took me a while to really get into it, but then by halfway point I was locked in. Like, there was no going back. The pace of the book was honestly really good, and I just loved it. I don't know, A Court of Thorns and Roses could either be top reads or my comfort books because I genuinely could reread it like till the end of time. It's not my Roman Empire, but it's like pretty up there. I think I'd have to put it at top reads for sure, because I cannot stop yapping about this book and like recommending it to everybody. Next is A Court of Mist and Fury. I remember running to my Barnes & Noble picking up this book to continue the series. The plot, the pace, the tension, the banter was so good. Like I was just eating it up, and you guys, we all know chapter 54 and 55 just hit different. At this time, I gave it a 5 stars, and to this day, A Court of Mist and Fury is my favorite book out of the ACOTAR series, putting A Court of Mist and Fury as my Roman Empire. That is definitely one of those books that just like completely altered my life. Next is A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is the 3rd book of the ACOTAR series. At this time, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I think I still stand with the 4 out of 5. Aihara's character arc is just amazing in this book. She's navigating this like love story. She's navigating her like new life essentially. I love seeing her like clever side come out to protect the people that she loves. It was just so good. And the High Lords meeting is literally one of my favorite scenes of all time. Like I can't get into it because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it, but just trust. Aside from that, I thought some parts of the book were a little predictable and a little just like unserious and rushed. So that's why I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'm sticking with my rating, and I'm gonna put A Court of Wings and Ruins as top reads. Still very good. Okay, next is A Court of Frost and Starlights. This is the novella in the series, and it's honestly like a little holiday episode of the ACOTAR series. There's a lot of spice, not like too much plot, but I also don't understand why people dog on this book so much. Like people have rated it like a 2 out of 5. I personally rate it like a 3.5, maybe 4, just because like the plot is slower, but it's a novella. It's a holiday episode. People just dogged on it because there was like not a lot of action, but I'm like, can we just have like a pause and like have our main characters enjoy their presence? I don't understand why it gets a bad rep. It's not one of my favorite books ever, but it's still good. I think I would rate A Court of Frost and Starlight as like my comfort books because I still would reread it. It's not one of my top reads by any means. Next is A Court of Silver Flames. This is book number 4 of the ACOTAR series. This is another hot take that I have. I did not like this book. In 2023, I DNF'd it. Just like to put it simply, I do not love the main character in this book, and this isn't a spoiler, it's about Nesta. So I actually DNF'd this book in 2023, and that was the time that I started Throne of Glass, finished the series, and I revisited it after like 5 months and finished it so I could move on and read Crescent City. You guys, I don't know. I loved her character arc and her character development. I don't know, there was just like a lot of loopholes, and again, we can discuss this like in my Discord or on my IG, but there's a lot of loopholes for me that I need answered, and I hope they're answered in the 6th book of the series. I don't know, I didn't love it, so I rated it a 3 out of 5, and honestly, I stand with it. So I'm gonna rate A Court of Silver Flames as mid. Sorry to all my Nesta girlies, I like her, I just don't love her. Okay, that's not taking away from her amazing character development. There was just times where I just like could not stand her. I just think there's a lot of loopholes in the plot. There's just times where I just like had to put it down because I would just get so frustrated. So Nesta girlies, please don't hate me. I'm not your enemy. I just didn't love it. But with that being said, I'm so excited for the 6th book of ACOTAR to come out. I'm really hoping that it's more focused on Azriel. Next, I had to do a little palette cleanser from all the fantasy I was consuming. I needed to like touch grass and come back to real life. I picked up Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was like a cute read. I gave this book a 3 out of 5, and I think the reason is because I was coming from like a very thought out, well-developed fantasy plot with very complex characters to a standalone romance book. I honestly liked the plot in this book. I just thought it was very predictable, and there was just not a lot of like side plots. But again, I think it was just because I came from ACOTAR. There's a lot of subplots, a lot of world building. So this just seemed very vague and like simple to me and very predictable. So Book Lovers to me is mid. And now we're getting into my favorite series of all time that I cannot shut up about on my vlogs. Throne of Glass. Just thinking about this series like genuinely makes me want to just like sob. If you know, you know. If you don't know, like you really need to know. I know there's a lot of debate on the reading order of Throne of Glass. I'm gonna share with you guys my reading order for Throne of Glass. So the first book that I read is Assassin's Blade. This is the prequel to Throne of Glass series, and I do not regret my decision of reading the prequel first. Even though technically you're supposed to read it, I think 3rd in the series, I recommend first because you get so much background information on the main character and who she is. This isn't a spoiler at all, but you're introduced to characters that become pivotal okay, that become pivotal into the main plot. You just get a lot of context into who the MC is and the reason why she is the way she is. There's some people that have skipped this book altogether, and I don't understand how, just because of like, I've developed such an emotional attachment to some characters in this prequel. Again, if you know, you know, like, I'm not about to cry on the internet. Please, please, please read Assassin's Blade first. Now that I've read it and I'm looking back, it is hard to get into because you're kind of jumping between like different times of the MC's life. There's no plot yet, but just please trust the process. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 and I stand by it. This is a top read for me for sure. Next is officially book number 1 of Throne of Glass series. This is called Throne of Glass. I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I loved the games aspect of this book. It was giving Divergent Hunger Games vibes, like you either survive or you die. But I gave it a 3 out of 5 just because it's very hard to get into at first, because there's a lot of world building and there's a lot of open-ended plot, because again, it's the first book. It's an 8 series book, so you really have to be patient and just understand that all this information being thrown at you will make sense in the future. It's just like you need to be patient and see it through. The world building was a lot for me, and just like having all these open-ended plot lines was just kind of frustrating for me, to be honest. But again, this is a trust the process series. Like, just trust, just please trust. So I still stick with it as like 3.5 out of 5. It's still good, okay? It's still good. I would definitely reread it, but I don't think it's like a top read for me, so I'm gonna put it under comfort books. Book number 2 of the series, Crown of Midnight. Things finally start to pick up in this book, okay? I really love the male love interest in this book. I'm a writer for him till the end of time. I will accept no hate on this male character. If you've read this series, you know who I'm talking about. The ending of this book is a major plot twist. This book had me shaking in my boots. I will say the book didn't really pick up to about halfway for me, but then the ending made it all worth it. I was like, what is going on? I was like, girl, the math ain't mathin'. We need to pick up the next book ASAP. I gave this book a 4 out of 5, and I think that still stands for me. I think I'm gonna have to put it under my comfort books. Third book in this series, Heir of Fire. My review on Goodreads is screaming, crying. You guys, screaming, crying, throwing up is my description of this book. The character development in this book is probably one of my favorite I've ever read, okay? This is when things really start to take a turn and things are starting to click. And you guys, I don't want to talk too much about it because you guys just need to experience this for yourselves, but the plot really starts to develop in this book, and character development is just unmatched. Like, I just cannot stress that enough. This is like the becoming of this character, and it's just one of my favorite books of all time. So I gave this book a 5 out of 5. Heir of Fire is definitely a top read for me. Book number 4 of the series, Queen of Shadows. You guys, this book is my Roman Empire. This is when the characters just start to step into their power, and this is where some like tension and banter comes into play, and it's just the perfect fusion of plot and romance and just tension and angst. We also see some side characters like come into the story, and it just is a masterpiece. Like, there's so many complex characters in this series, and seeing them all like kind of start to come into play in this book is just a masterpiece. So Queen of Shadows is definitely in the My Roman Empire tier. Book number 5, Empire of Storms. Emotional damage is all I'm gonna say. You can choose to do a tandem read with book number 5 and book number 6, which is Tower of Dawn. I did not do the tandem read because I feel like I need to focus on one storyline at a time. There's so many characters in this series. I feel like I could not be like jumping from place to place and remember everything that was going on. Honestly, I do not regret my decision. Empire of Storms is just a whirlwind of emotions. That's all I'm gonna say. The plot becomes way more dense, decisions become heavier, the weight of the world just becomes like on your shoulders, and there's just so much emotion that goes into this book, and there were moments that I was actually just straight up crying during this book. I rated this book a 5, and this is definitely in my top reads tier. Book number 6 is Tower of Dawn. It took me a really long time to get into this book. At halfway was when I really was like, okay, I am into this. I am here for the tension, the angst, the subplots, and the introduction of new characters. This book has one of my favorite slow burns of all time, and definitely one of my favorite character arcs. The male character in this seriously has my heart. Like, he is just everything to me. This is definitely one of my favorites. I gave it a 4 out of 5, but honestly, I think I give it a 5. Tower of Dawn is definitely in my top reads. And we have the last book of the series, which is Kingdom of Ash. I just like, I need a moment. I need a moment. There's absolutely no words to describe this masterpiece, okay? I will say there are some things that I question in this book. There's some loopholes that have not been solved for me. I can vividly like see a movie of specific parts of this book. There was 4 times in this book that I sobbed. I actually sobbed. I had to put it down and I just had to like touch grass and come back to reality because this book is insane. So there's no words to describe this. I'm not going to talk about it because you need to experience this for yourself. Kingdom of Ash is definitely in my Roman Empire tier. We are now moving on to Sarah J Maas's most recent series, which is Crescent City. First book of the series is House of Earth and Blood. I rated this a 4 out of 5, but honestly, I think I'd rate it a 3.5 just because there's a ton of world building. If you thought there was world building in Throne of Glass and ACOTAR, moving on to a different world is very hard for me because you're introduced to a different world, you're introduced to different characters, and you're introduced to just a whole different plot. And it's in a different time, which was very hard for me to adapt to. It was honestly just really hard for me to get into. But I will say the pace at the end of the book and the events that happened had me hooked. So for that reason, I'm at a 3.5 out of 5. And so for that reason, I think, I don't know, I'm stuck between my comfort books and mid. If there was a tier between my comfort books and mid, I'd put it there. But I think just because I didn't enjoy it as much as the other books in the series, I'm gonna have to put it at mid. But you still should read it. Like, just because I put things at mid does not mean you shouldn't read it. I still highly recommend this book. Next in the Crescent City series, House of Sky and Breath. I loved the plot and the pace of this book. Still world building at this point, so it still took a minute for me to get into the plot. But the pace of the book is so much better than the first one. And the reason why I rated this a 4 out of 5 is because the end of the book, I cried at this cliffhanger. I'm not gonna say if it's happy tears or sad tears, but all of that world building to get into this series was worth it just for the ending of this book. That's all I'm gonna say. So I give this a 4 out of 5. And so for that reason, I'm gonna put House of Sky and Breath under top reads. Just because of the pace, the plot, and the ending, it made it all worth it. The third book in Crescent City is House of Flame and Shadow. I think this is a hot take. I rated it a 2 out of 5. I was very underwhelmed with this book. I felt that it was written by a completely different author. I just felt like there were so many loose ends. Also gonna give her credit though, because I think the loose ends were on purpose to set up the premise for the next book that's coming out in the Crescent City series. I just felt like this book was so rushed, and I felt like there was so much spice to the point where I actually had to skip over some of the spicy spots because I thought it was just so unnecessary amidst what was happening in the plot. But I don't know, I still think there's so many loopholes in this book. If you've read it, we should chat in the Discord about it because I have a full-on list in my notes app of everything that I've discussed with my best friend about, because there are just so many loopholes and so many things that I thought were inconsistent with the plot, that were inconsistent with like the whole Sarah J Maas universe. There was one character in there that I absolutely loved, and I think they deserve their own book. If they had their own book, I would read it. But I was just very underwhelmed with the MC and how she was in this book. But I do think a 2 is a little harsh. I'll give it a 3. So I'm gonna put House of Flame and Shadow, honestly, under mid. It just didn't really do it for me. And now we're moving on to my most recent series. This is the Empyrean series, which is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. The first book is Fourth Wing. I'm just gonna say 2 words. Xaden Ryerson. That's all I'm gonna say. Actually, no, I'm gonna yap about it. This book single-handedly resurrected me from my massive book slump after reading all of Sarah J Maas's like universe of books. I just could not recover from reading all of her books, and I was just so down bad. I just refused to move on until my best friend convinced me, and I read it in a day and a half. And you guys, it resurrected me. I'm in this world and I'm here to stay. I cannot recommend this series enough, especially if you're looking for a shorter series. This series will be 5 books eventually. The third book is coming out in January of 2025. But I would recommend if you really want to get into fantasy, because right now it's only 2 books and the books are not that big, honestly. I cannot recommend this book enough. The world building, the plot, and the pace was like 10 out of 10 for me. I really love the pace of it. There is a lot of world building, especially if you're coming from like a different genre and a different like fantasy world. It's definitely a lot to get used to because there's just different like creatures in this one. Guys, this book is so good. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It still stands. I'm gonna put Fourth Wing as a top read for sure. Second book in the Empyrean series is Iron Flame. I am in agony because the next book does not come out till next year. A lot of people dog on Iron Flame and I don't know why either. A lot of people complained that the plot was too slow, too dragged out, and a lot of people were frustrated with the main character. And that was me when I was reading it, but then after I read it and I was like reflecting and like looking up some of like the interviews that the author had about the book, I completely changed my opinion. And I think Iron Flame is better than the first book because the main character is going through like such a big character development. She's trying to figure her identity out after some things have happened in the first book. A lot of people just discredit this character because they think that she should have it all figured out. They think that she should be strong. And I'm like, this girl is literally like, in the series, I think she's 21, no? And I'm like, this is literally just a girl. And so if that were you, would you have your identity 100% fully figured out after having like a ton of things just like stripped from you? And so I just think that like people discredit the main character in this as she's going through like the biggest character arc of her life. Like she's not supposed to have it all figured out and she's trying to figure out who she is. Looking back, I genuinely enjoyed like the brutal honesty and the frustration that this character has gone through in this book to try to figure herself out because it's realistic. And people were complaining about the pace of the book, which I could totally understand, especially being that you like love these two characters together. But honestly, I think this pace was needed so that these characters could go through, you know, their own development to be better for like each other and to just navigate what's going on with not just themselves, but also the world around them. Chapter 48, if you know, you know. You guys, chapter 48 has me in a literal just chokehold. Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to put Iron Flame as my Roman Empire because the banter, the tension, the plot, the ending, I think it's a masterpiece. No notes. So that is the end of the Empyrean series. And I just noticed that I have 4 books that I have not rated in my Goodreads that are left on this tier. So let's rate them together really quick. We have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I distinctly remember this. It was all right. I honestly didn't care for it. I definitely loved the character development, and every husband that she had was a crucial part in her life and it led her to become the woman that she is. It was enjoyable following along her story, but honestly, it was just really hard to keep me intrigued. I remember it took me a while to get through this book. Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to put it at mid. Then we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is my 3rd Emily Henry book and I really loved it. I read it last year during the summer on a beach trip and I just loved the vibe of this book. It was the perfect book to take like to the beach or just like a little vacation. I really loved the plot and the tension and the romance. I thought it was so cute. This book is definitely like a comfort book for me. I would reread it in the summertime. I think I'd give it a solid 3.5, 4. Then we have It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. Not gonna lie, I did not really have the best time reading this. It's cute seeing the love story like develop from like the beginning of everything, but I don't know, there was just some parts that were really cringy with like the writing style that I just didn't enjoy. I honestly don't remember a lot of parts where I was just like, ugh, I love this. Honestly, I think this was a different version of me. And then lastly, The Spanish Love Deception. I'm not gonna lie, I DNF'd this book. Like, I think it was like 50 pages in. I couldn't get into it. I don't know if it was the writing style for me or just the way that the main character was. There were just so many parts within like 50 pages that was so cringy to me, and I was like, I can't do this. I also picked this book up after reading ACOTAR, and so coming from Sarah J Maas's writing style of romantasy and like developing these characters, and then reading The Spanish Love Deception was just like worlds apart. I couldn't get into it. I was just honestly cringed out. So I DNF'd it. So I can't really even rate it because I didn't read it all. So this is gonna be a NAR for me. So yeah, that is my ratings and reviews of these books. It was so fun tiering my books. I've never done this. I've just always seen my favorite like booktubers do this. And this was so fun. I definitely want to do this again once I start like building up my library a little bit more. But I'm gonna make this a template in case you guys want to make this yourselves and rate your books. The link will be down below if you guys want to make your own little book tier. I would love to see this in the Discord chat if you are part of our book club. I'd love to see your guys' ratings of all the books that you guys have read. That way I can build up my TBR and and just explore different books. But yeah, that was so much fun. Thank you guys so much for listening to me yap about my books. I love talking about books so much. My book collection is tiny but mighty compared to most, you know, booktubers or book talk girlies, but I'm slowly but surely building my collection, especially with our book club. If you want to join our besties book club, I left the Patreon link down below if you want to check it out. I would love for you guys to join. But yeah, with that being said, I cannot wait to make more of these book tier videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next vid. Love you, bye.